and welcome to Jesuitical, a podcast from America Media for saints and sinners. You can join us each week for honest conversations about the Catholic Church and our world today, often over drinks. I'm Ashley McKinless, and I'm joined by Zach Davis.
It's good to be with you. We've got a really important show this week. Really excited to share it with our listeners. It's tough to get through, but I think a timely topic, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to hear about the church's response.
Yeah, so I think the Trump administration's mass deportation campaign is probably one of the biggest stories in our country and for our church today. And I think a lot of people have seen the major headlines, like Trump is sending National Guard to this city or that city, and this governor is fighting back. Or maybe they've seen really tense scenes of protesters clashing with ICE agents or police. But we wanted to kind of not step back, but kind of step into it and see what it feels like day to day to be in a city like Chicago, where the Trump administration has really concentrated its deportation efforts.
Yeah, so this week we're talking to Father Brendan Curran, who is a Dominican priest, also a community organizer in Chicago, and also serves for the Dominican Order as their promoter of justice and peace. So we're asking him about what he's seeing on the ground in Chicago, how the church is responding to it, and why Catholics should care about what's going on to begin with.
Yeah. So that's a great conversation. But first, we have Signs of the Times, the part of our show where we sift through the Catholic news of the week so you don't have to. What's our first story, Zach?
So first two stories, communion themed, I would say. And starting off with a discovery in Turkey. Archaeologists have found a 1,200-year-old loaf of bread that had the image of Jesus, what's the word, embossed, carved into it. What do you do to bread? Do you carve into bread?
Yeah, you carve a pumpkin,
mark
you
into
carve
bread.
a loaf.
Yeah, bread was stale.
Yes.
The experts said.
I have to admit, when I saw this headline in the New York Post, I was expecting to see, when there's a toast and it looks like Jesus or the Virgin Mary is there.
Yeah.
I was expecting something like that. But then you click through, and this is actually, they are loaves of bread that are, like you said, carved.
Intentionally, drawn into
clearly,
the bread.
because it's not only an image of Jesus Christ, there is an engraving that says, "With our gratitude to blessed Jesus." And this was just one of 5 loaves that were found dating back to the 7th or 8th century. And a few of the others just had simple Greek crosses on them. And the assumption is that these were used for the Eucharist in the early Christian community.
Yeah, and it's the depiction isn't really I think some art from that period is like Jesus is emperor of the universe. But this is sort of a simpler Jesus. The depiction is like Christ the farmer, which I thought was also a really nice detail.
Do you think they had liturgy wars that, the ones who used Christ Christ rule over the world were more reverent than Christ the farmer?
I think there's something deeply human about fighting about liturgy. So I'm going to say yes. But I thought this was a nice story. Not only because it's cool archaeology, I'm sure there's a Catholic
really old.
Indiana Jones, or is Indiana Jones already Catholic? I think he is already Catholic. So there is just someone like Indiana Jones discovering this, getting excited about it. But it also reminds us that, we belong to a heritage of Christians who have been celebrating the Eucharist at Jesus' command for thousands of years, which I thought was really cool. It does lead into our next story, though, where Christians are celebrating the Eucharist, even still today, using not bread, but wine.
Yes, that's right. This comes from Kenya, where the bishops have decided to adopt a proprietary wine to use at Mass. And this is because the wine they had been using has started popping up in liquor stores and bars. And some Catholics and priests there were kind of scandalized this. They were worried that it was sacrilege to have this wine that's used on the altar in their local pub.
Yeah, I kind of get it, especially because it's not consecrated as the actual blood of Christ.
Yeah, but it does have a cross on its label, so it's marked as religious.
Yeah,
purposes.
And it's definitely imprudent, to say the very least, and probably disrespectful. Also, I think some people felt uncomfortable during that scene in Lady Bird when they're eating hosts out of the jar, unconsecrated hosts out of the jar, just as a snack. I think for similar reasons. I thought that was a funny Catholic school movie scene. But if you're, just coming from Mass where you drank the blood of Christ and then you see the bottle that was used just next door at the pub, not awesome. Something else that was interesting is that the bishop said they were having a hard time verifying where the wine actually was coming from, because there is this huge alcohol counterfeit problem in Kenya where, even if there's a bottle of Jim Beam imported from the United States, someone is just swapping that out and keeping the label on there in order to make a little bit more money.
I don't think this is a Kenya problem. I'm sure that happens in the United States.
Yeah, lots of parents' liquor cabinets have had the same thing happen to them. I know.
But it's that this is an actual problem for Catholics, because I learned this, and I guess you probably learned this when you did your big feature on wine, but the wine used at Mass has to be only made from grapes. So if you have any other additives, which might happen when you have, it looks like the Catholic bottle, but someone else has put some cheap other wine in it, it might have ethanol or other things that aren't permissible in the Catholic Mass, right?
That's right. Essentially, like, to have valid matter for the Eucharist, it's got to be wine made from grapes. And there are a couple other ways you can do that. Like, sometimes there is a bit of higher alcohol added to the grape, but that has to be added during fermentation, and that will make the wine last a little longer, because you're typically not downing an entire bottle when you're using Mass for communion. It's shelf stable. You want to keep it shelf stable. But I kind of like this because there is a reclamation of Catholic culture here, where it's we're going to make our own wine, which is what, Catholics and missionaries have done, throughout the ages. When they needed wine for Mass, they planted the grapes and they grew it themselves. This wine in Kenya is being imported from South Africa, which makes a lot of great wine. So I'm pretty
pop
confident.
Quiz. What's distinctive about wine from the Western Cape province in South Africa?
What? How would you like me to answer this? In general, or no?
Have they chosen well, and where
Absolutely,
they're getting their wine
from? A great climate. Western Cape is a great DO of South Africa. But yeah, I think this is kind of a cool story. The church is reclaiming the tool, the things it uses for Mass, making it themselves. Even if they're not making it, right? It's being imported from South Africa. The bottle does have the bishop's seal on it. It does look pretty cool. Not that really matters, but
and only priests can buy it, or people who have a note that says they are acting on behalf of the church. So.
Yeah. So I guess all you'd have to do is counterfeit that instead of counterfeiting the wine.
Hopefully they won't do that.
Yeah. What's our last story, Ashley?
All right, so the president of the U.S. bishops, Archbishop Timothy Broglio, who's also the head of the Archdiocese for the military, is pushing back on the U.S. Army, which recently canceled its contracts with Catholic services that would go into Army bases and that sort of thing, and provide religious education, help out at the parish, provide music, and that sort of thing.
That's right. And I'll be honest, this is sort of a world into Catholicism that I didn't really know much about. So I appreciate Archbishop Broglio writing this letter, both because it, I think, raises an important issue, but also taught me a lot about how pastoral life in the military works. You tend to think that in the military there are chaplains and that's it. But actually there is also this other infrastructure around to sort of make the same way you would at any parish, make pastoral life happen. So you said, catechists and music directors, and just some basic administrative stuff that priests need help with.
Yeah, because it's not just soldiers that they're serving. There are families on these bases that need to have First Communion and confirmation, and the limited number of Catholic chaplains that are serving the Army, often not on the base, can't provide all of those services.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so the U.S. Army Installation Management Command announced in March that all these contracts would be canceled, and early October they officially ended. So that meant starting in October, if you went to a chapel on an Army base, there probably wasn't music at Mass, for example, and there's probably not anyone coordinating religious education there either.
Yeah, and so Broglio makes the point that this is not just hurting all religions, it's hurting Catholics specifically for two reasons. One, I already mentioned, is there aren't that many Catholic chaplains compared to the number of Catholics in the Army. They make up 5% of the chaplaincy, and there are 20% of soldiers are Catholic, so there's already a disproportion there. I think there's one Catholic chaplain for every 1,000 Catholic soldiers, and 6 Protestant for every 1,000 Protestant soldiers. Chaplains are stretched thin, and compared to other religions, Catholics are kind of resource intensive. Because we have to have sacramental preparation, as we said, the priest can't do it alone. They have to bring in support services.
One thing I'd be curious about is this reflective of the wider priest shortage? Is that why the chaplaincy numbers are skewed? Or are there a disproportionate number of posts or contracts? That's like a question I have. But nonetheless, like the effects are real. And by canceling these contracts, by, basically removing a lot of the lay leaders who are helping form and accompany and minister to soldiers and their families, spiritual care for a lot of these people is going to diminish greatly. The Army has suggested that maybe people can go off base for spiritual formation, which Archbishop Broglio rightly points out that a lot of soldiers are stationed in countries that that don't exactly have a Christian majority, and it's not like the easiest thing to go off base and receive sacramental or pastoral care.
Yeah, and the Army did say on Tuesday, October 21st, that they were going to re-examine their decision to cancel all of these contracts. They say they remain deeply committed to providing for the religious needs of all personnel, regardless of their faith background. So that was this week, so we'll see what happens next and keep you posted on this story.
Yeah, it seems like they are in the business of canceling lots of contracts right now at the federal level. So I am not optimistic, but I'm hopeful for these soldiers' sake that they get some pastoral care back.
Now stick around for our conversation with Father Brendan Curran about the ICE crackdown in Chicago. Joining us from Chicago is Father Brendan Curran. Father Curran is a Dominican priest who leads interfaith partnerships at the Resurrection Project and serves on the International Dominican Commission for Justice and Peace. Welcome to Jesuitical, Father Curran.
Really, really honored to be here. Thanks for all you're doing.
No, thank you. And thanks for helping us out and understanding what's going on in Chicago right now. I think a lot of listeners have seen headlines, seen news reports. We talked about on our show the Eucharistic procession to the Broadview Detention Center. I'm wondering if you could just kind of give an overview of why Chicago's been in the headlines and what Operation Midway, as the current administration is putting it. What's going on?
Since mid-August, the federal administration targeted Chicago at first and through the summer about talking about trying to get a handle of controlling street violence. That was the purported reason for federal agents to be assigned to Chicago in a robust way, being pulled from other parts of the country in an attempt to deal with that. As I think, honestly, I would have predicted, it was nothing about the street violence. It was everything about immigration surveillance. I'm saying that language intentionally. The efforts of the federal administration to be going after the high criminal offenders of the millions of those who are undocumented, not millions in Chicago, but across the country, was the admitted reason for any focus that was going to address immigration during this period since mid-August. All we have seen is the arrival of large numbers of federal agents masked completely with heavy military weapons, AR-15s, AK-47s. I'm not supposed to know those terms. I'm not a military family within my core family. My cousins, I have a number have served. But we've seen this for days, every single day. Folks wearing heavy material and military equipment, doing federal agent activity in and around the whole northern Illinois area, mostly focused on Chicago and the inner suburbs of the west suburbs of Chicago. It has been a dramatic change for years. I was a co-founder of a small group that became a big group, Priests for Justice for Immigrants in the Archdiocese of Chicago. About a third of them were religious order priests and diocesan priests banding together in the early 2000s to push for immigration reform, comprehensive reform. That particular group has been high octane. We don't get much sleep these days because every single day we have reports of ICE agents plucking people off the street and racially profiling people and other utterly disturbing instances of aggression of federal agents within the immigrant communities and parishes we serve.
I want to linger on what Zach mentioned, the name of this operation, Operation Midway Blitz, which some people might, know that the airport in Chicago is Midway, but that's named after a battle in World War II. So the fact that we have this operation in the United States targeting an American city named after a World War II battle, you mentioned having these heavily armed soldiers guard in your city. As an American, what does that feel like?
It has been utterly disturbing my spirit. I'll just be utterly honest. I know I'm not alone. The sisters have been right there. The lay leaders have been right there, really more so in front of us. We're just trying to do our part in being public about what we're seeing, because we feel it's our Catholic duty. When I see these vehicles that are unbelievably concealed, when I say concealed, I mean tinted windows all the way around, which is illegal. License plates that have electric tape covering the actual numbers in the United States, going around surveilling people, and with officers, federal agents that are unknown with no badges, no nothing, with this heavily surveilled military equipment they're carrying out these operations is utterly disgusting. Sad for me to say that, but also very, very alarming. What are we doing? For 19 years, we've gone to Broadview Detention Center to do prayer for comprehensive immigration reform. The two key people I just need to tip the hat to, Sister Pat Murphy, Joanne Perch, Mercy Sisters, Trailblazers, really been leading us. We're just catching up. Coordinated efforts to plant that intentionality every Friday of Rosary at Broadview Detention Center, which has been widely reported. That has been unbroken. That's through COVID. That's through all kinds. But it also was at a peaceful time. We used to go into Broadview. I used to get on the buses. We used to pray with the folks being detained, heading towards the airport on the final step of the process of deportation, because Broadview is a processing place. And seeing that was utterly heart-wrenching then, but utterly disturbing now to see the huge development and change of the tenor of things happening now.
Earlier in October, there was the Eucharistic procession to the Broadview Detention Center.
That's right.
And some people looked at that and said, this is a political stunt. Like, they're just trying to go viral. If they really wanted to do good, they should go through the normal loopholes and checklists in order to minister to people there. But you're telling me this has been a site of prayer and ministry for a long time before.
For a long time before. And we used to get access into, first of all, people don't know Broadview is a transitional facility. It is a detention center. And we used to go for years, rotating a whole bunch of different folks to do prayer, campus ministries, all that kind of stuff, high school, college. It was a major site for outreach of social service opportunities for students and faculty at different institutions around.
And so what would you say to someone who says you all were just trying to do a political stunt?
What we would say first and foremost is that families have been utterly hunkered down, petrified, afraid. We have parishes have suddenly become a COVID-style operation where we're getting people groceries. People are afraid to leave their apartment. We have to realize how bad this is felt on the ground in the parish. We have religious ed classes at one of the parishes. I preach all around because I try to network parishes to work together on different common crises or problems. Several of those parishes have temporarily suspended religious education, not because of the kids, but because of the safety of their parents on pickup drop-off. This is how serious this has become, where people are being plucked off the sidewalk simply for looking Latino and looking immigrant and presumptively an undocumented immigrant.
Yeah, I want to talk about who is actually being targeted. You mentioned initially there was this smokescreen of like, we're going to go after criminals on the street. And then on top of that, the Trump administration, at least during the campaign, was saying, we're just going to go after the criminals that have committed horrendous crimes. But in reality, who in Chicago have they targeted and picked up?
No, it's really important and heartbreaking. We have a flower vendor over by one of the area high schools selling flowers next to a bus stop, was plucked up and picked up and detained. We have a mom who went to a local parish daily mass after dropping her kids off at a Catholic school, leaving a parking lot of a parish and being blocked in by two vehicles of immigration in front and behind her, forcing her to declare her immigration status in broad daylight on the street. We've never seen this. Based on what proof? No warrant, no nothing. By the way, not that it really matters because it's unethically going on. She is not undocumented. They weren't targeting her on some list. This has been hugely shifting in terms of some of the patterns and ethics of what's happening, and it's been utterly disturbing. So the Eucharistic procession, honestly, is a pastoral moment for parishes of people who feel totally profiled, totally targeted, and a sense of comfort at the end to try to administer communion to those who are detained, which is a state law. We have the opportunity to do pastoral ministry in the detention center. State law passed, I want to say 10 years ago, kind of forget the year by memory. And we have not been allowed to be anywhere near the building, let alone in the facility for quite some time. Now you have to realize, Broadview, no beds, over 200 people a day. Think about it. 3 to 7 days, they're detained and remain there on average. Now, all we know, we do not know this, anything more from those who previously were detained. Most of them, tragically, now in their country of origin of their birth after deportation, because we're not allowed in. Elected officials aren't allowed in. It's a very scary situation that it's not transparent in normal public facility ways. And for the pastoral side, that was the intent of the procession. One, it was to serve two goals. One, to lift up the spirit of people absolutely petrified in who attend our parishes. Some 20 parishes united, Black and brown community. Some folks, longtime generations of U.S. citizens in their parish from across the Chicagoland area decided we need to do this as a pastoral symbol to our families and our community. We will not abandon you. And if the pilgrimage was to there as an intentionality of saying, right now where people feel most abandoned, not by God, but abandoned in the sense of nobody is listening, is a facility like Broadview. So that was the intent of the procession, was to remind us of the spirit of our faith tradition that welcomes the stranger. Mary and Joseph were actually exiles who fled the country to protect child Jesus. Moses and Aaron fled Egyptian persecution. We know all the stories. It's been part of our legacy as Catholics. So we were trying to walk a little the walk, not just talk the talk as pastoral ministers.
And the videos I saw of that procession and others have been perfectly peaceful, and yet we've seen these pretty disturbing scenes of tear gas, pebble shots. There was a pastor who was like shot in the face with one of these non-lethal weapons. What is leading to those flare-ups?
What is disturbing to me, it's absolutely a miracle that people have been protesting have not become violent. I have been shocked at the level of aggression by federal agents to our people. When I say our people, I'm talking about ministers, people we watch, people who are there, who do prayer vigils, have done prayer vigils for years at Broadview Detention Center and other places, and have been experiencing these interventions in the community on the blocks. 39th and Kedzie, I was caught coming from a quinceañera, for those who don't know that, coming of age celebration in our Latino community. This particular family is Mexican. And I was driving around to Pershing and 39th and Kedzie, and I encountered this absolute intervention where there was a tank going right down the street. A tank. It's actually a SWAT vehicle. I don't know all these military vehicle terms. I later figured out that it was a SWAT, but that's what it looks like. And 20 to 30 troops side by side coming right down the street, clearing people out. The people that are clearing out were just protesting. They weren't throwing anything at them. They were yelling because they were upset. What are you doing in our community to us like this? And it was utterly disturbing. My car got caught in the middle of the tear gas and came right through my exhaust system. And so I got an experience of my own in the middle of that traffic trying to get through there. This is the experience.
The mood on the ground sounds terrifying, particularly for those who are being targeted. I'm curious if the way that this issue sort of divides people politically across the country, if you feel any of that in Chicago as well, or how is it landing there?
Yeah, the political division is such a difficult thing to maneuver to explain to people what we're seeing, because people assume we're with this camp or that camp on this issue. Leaving that aside, it's about civility. It's about seeing people who represent our public service, and so laudable. I have dear friends and family members who are in public service, from police officers to National Guard, right? And this is just not what they signed up for, to see this kind of stuff and to be seeing representation of this stuff on our behalf collectively. When I say this stuff, I've witnessed pepper bullets going at people, myself having to figure out, how do you clean out your eyes? Like, I don't know this. People were not being violent. People were just there concerned with people who have loved ones trying to get assistance at that particular facility. And then at other sites where people have been stopped, people are just trying to ask, what's going on? Why are we doing this to people? Pulling them, the Swaparama flea market the other day. It's a flea market. And ICE agents stormed two doorways or entranceways into the booth and climbed the fence like an invasion of a flea market. Some of us have never been to a flea market, but it is absolute, simple, impoverished person space for people to make a few bucks, to make ends meet and get by. And a lot of our communities, people rely on this, and they storm the place like everybody's undocumented, with no rhyme or reason, with no names on any list or anything, and knocking over tables.
I mean, say you even if you have all your documentation and legal status,
Right.
Is that the kind of place that you want to be around if that's likely going to happen after you've heard reports of that?
Yeah.
Flea markets, you can't take your kids to religious education. I mean,
Right.
the normal functioning of public life seems to be just severely under threat.
It's completely interrupted. Exactly. There's a pastor, a dear good friend, a Scalabrini pastor, Scalabrinians, a religious order. They run a parish in Mount Melrose Park. He called me desperately seeking, because I've been kind of at this with a few of us for about 20 years. He said, what do I do? I've got 6 ICE vehicles parked around my campus of the parish, and I've got a evening mass for the novena. And he doesn't know what to do. What do you do when this is going on? This is the kind of surveillant activity that is absolutely the opposite of what I believe are the American values of what we expect of public servants in our community. And what do we do there? I mean, there must be a better way. I have yet to, I've been doing this for years, right? I have yet since the beginning of August to find one family who has a criminal background of any sort who's been plucked up by these ICE activities. I know plenty of people. One guy's coming back from work at night, walking down the street towards his house on the same block where his house was. ICE agents stopped on a vehicle right next to where he was walking down the sidewalk, pulled him over, forced him to the ground, forced him to present his credentials of his immigration status out on the plain street. I didn't know we were supposed to carry our immigration status proof wherever we go in the United States.
Well, that gets to what maybe people expected they were voting for when they voted for Donald Trump, who really did. I think most political analysts would say this and inflation were what got him his victory. So I'm wondering if you've heard from people who maybe they didn't vote for Trump, maybe they did, but they were concerned about the chaos at the border and thought it was out of control and were concerned about it. People like that, what are they saying in response to what they're seeing on the streets in Chicago?
Well, some people who, feel like they supported some of the values of some of what the government was trying to do and its kind of priorities, are really angry about this because this isn't what they signed up for, if you want to say, of their support of some of that platform, I guess would be the good, clear word to say. Because it wasn't about this, and what they're discovering, it's not about criminal offenders. I think there's a lot of support or experience of people who are concerned about folks who are doing organized criminal activity and may be undocumented in our country as a primary target that the government has tried to name as a priority. When we have a building, 7-story tall building of 250 families, where you have stormtroopers. I'm not kidding. It's not a movie. Rappelling down onto the roof at 2 a.m., coming in up over the fence and breaking down the doors of every unit in the complex at 2 a.m, 300 federal agents using budget rental trucks. And when you open the back bay door, you have 50 troops coming out of the vehicle. Like that's like an invasion force going into a building, claiming that it's Salvatrucha, this organized crime group out of Venezuela that they were looking for. Well, what did you find? You zip tied 8-year-olds and laid them on the sidewalk for hours, interrogating not just them. By the way, 8-year-old interrogating them. Think about that. What are we doing? But everybody in the building was interrogated. Every single person got an interview with every one of those people allegedly looking for bad actor criminals. We have yet to find a gun found at the scene. They broke down every single apartment's door. Every door was broken down in the entire complex. This is what we're doing to make this safer. It's terrorizing our community. It is absolutely the experience I'm experiencing in the parishes.
And you'll see official government social media accounts post these edited clips of this very raid you're talking about on this apartment complex and posting it with the way it's been edited to show, like, glorify like this thing that's happening, like look at our troops go in and do their job and hoorah. There's a pride among some people in seeing this, and I'm curious if you have any sense if the spiritual sickness is there, because it seems to me that there's something deeply wrong on a spiritual level if you can find sort of the glee that some are showing there.
I think any of us woken up at 1 or 2 in the morning, right where we are, right in our bed, with people who are dressed like that and geared up like that. Some of those people are doing, post-traumatic stress kind of reactions to this over anything else that has happened to them in their lives. Some on domestic violence, some on, getting mugged or something. Others, all these people are going through these things after that intervention, really attack on the building occurred. It is speaking to a malaise that we believe. First and foremost, I think honestly, people think it's a movie. No, these are people's lives, number one. And these kind of actions have a toll. I feel for the troops of the moral uh, damage to them in exercising these interventions. I'm right now, my primary concern, we gotta hunker down and protect our community. They're under attack. The fact that we're saying that language is disturbing me, because it is like they're under attack. When you're pulling your car over or T-boning a car in the middle of the street of traffic, because that person honked at you, that they recognize you're an ICE agent, is an absolutely disillusioning experience to see reported on a continual basis. These kind of actions of overreach with a very destructive edge, going into neighborhoods and looking for people. This is a normal local municipal and normal county officer work, to go and interview people who they allege might be perpetrators of crime. That's normal procedure. They're trained to do those things. They're trained to do them not an accelerated pace or action, but to decelerate those, but to go to connect to people needed for questioning on an invention of a civil matter. We're not seeing that at all in practice by these folks. I have no idea how they're trained, who they're coming from, where they come from, wearing uniforms like they do that aren't uniforms, and driving pedestrian vehicles that are not marked is the worst symbol for the effectiveness of what they perpetrate they're trying to do, in my estimation.
You mentioned the first priority is trying to protect your local community, but I think you were saying that you're even worried about the sort of the waking up moment, or the sort of call to conscience that, could already be happening with the agents that are carrying this out. I'm curious, have you had a chance to talk to any of the agents or ask them what they're thinking, or call them to a change of life or tactics?
So the procession that you alluded to that went on, one of the things that the group disciplined itself on preparing for and practicing was the desire to actually honor those who serve, that it's not about them personally. It's about lifting up in a public way an issue that we believe is morally wrong because of the treatment of people, number one. And number two, that people are people first, and only secondarily your legal status or your status in our society kind of things. And so what they did is they did gestures to those officials that they encountered, from state troopers, state police, as you may know, well reported, are out around Broadview Detention Center. And I'll just say this. I accompany folks to their ICE appointments, immigration appointments now, and a number of us do. Mostly because folks are families are so afraid to even go. I went to one. A guy used to be and continues to be minister in our parishes for years. I've known him for years, 20 years. He and his partner were going to an appointment with ICE, which was actually his final appointment for approval for his residency card, his final appointment. And he was so petrified that they may actually remove him from the country for whatever reason that might be. He asked me to go with them. And what I found was an ICE Department of Homeland Security officer who clearly knew that the visible side of their service is absolutely showing a destructive side that she doesn't stand for. She could not be nothing more than exuberantly nice and respectful to this couple and myself in my presence, and almost absolutely apologetic for their service, because they all represent the same public service organization, Department of Homeland Security. I believe staff are absolutely appalled at their own staff's behavior. I believe it to my bone. They didn't sign up for this. This is meant to be federal service, a good government job to keep a space of order and processing of immigrants who just want to have some dreams accomplished in the United States. That's what I think they signed up for.
Yeah. And there have been lawsuits, I believe, in Chicago to try to stop some of this, which you've been involved in some fashion. I don't know how much you can talk about the specifics, but I'm curious, what the lawsuits are about and how the church is involved.
Sure. So obviously, because I'm part of that legal process, I can't speak about great detail, but just to say that these are about basics of free speech, of the right to protest, the right to faith expression, and the right to press, to have free access as press, to be in those spaces wherever intervention of a federal official and a civilian and a person living in the community may be found. They're about that decorum, and that's what the core of that spirit is about. I'm just a part of it to share some of those experiences that we have experienced over the years.
Why is the church there? And by there, I mean accompanying, walking with, responding. When you're in your Dominican habit, you're a very visible sign that the church is present in all of these occurrings. I'm curious what you would say to someone who might just be wondering why the church is meddling in all of this.
Well, it's the very same way, even that's a crude example, right? We have chaplains to jails. We have chaplains to prisons. We have folks who are chaplains within our police department and other, emergency responders. We have chaplains at our fire department. Public service and the faith have crossed and will cross and are part of the core of our society. And we have to be in those spaces, even if they're difficult, right? If there's an earthquake, folks got to rise to the occasion of crisis. If there's a 911 attack, you've seen it across the country, people just rose to try to be of accompaniment with others going through the worst fear that would ever happen on our soil, right? This is one of those moments. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to equate any of those examples to this. This is very different. But we have to be pastoral agents accompanying people wherever they happen to be in these spaces. First of all, to remind them Christ is there. To remind that people of faith, they are people of faith. They deserve their dignity to have the physical witness of the presence of the church, wherever that may be. That is and has been, even if somebody's in going on a cruise, you have chaplains signed up who offer mass there. This is what we do. I signed up to do this. This is public service within our faith community, to be the witness there in those spaces, to remind people God is always at our side.
Pardon my ignorance about the Dominican charism. I know you're great preachers. I hadn't always thought of you as great, justice, immigrant, peace advocates. So for you personally or for your order, how does that fit in?
Well, in different parts of the world, there are Dominicans doing a number of things. So we have the order of preachers, that's the official term for Dominicans. But we've had a number of different models of Dominicans over the years, from Martin de Porres way back generations ago, reminding people that by the color of your skin, you should never be judged as a minister of the church. And he was a proud reminder to us of that continues to have a legacy today. Moving forward, you have Bartolomé de las Casas. You have Antonio Montesinos, who spoke out, one of the first voices to speak out against the injustice of the conquest of the Americas and the oppression against indigenous people. That and those are Dominicans. That's what Dominicans have done. You don't have a Dominican Republic without the Dominicans. It was named in our name. Most people don't know that. I say I'm a Dominican. Oh, they want to say you're kind of like complected to be a Dominican. Hey, we just know some of the cultural reality of that. But part of that is lifting up first of all, Dominican sisters in the United States have been kicking, excuse my French, butt on being out there on social action for years. Our friars, we're just trying to be a compelling accompaniment with those voices of empowerment of people in the trenches who've been doing great ministry, lay people, youth movement members of the Dominican family who've been there. And friars need to be stepping up because our community is hurting. Our community is feeling targeted unfairly, unethically today in Chicago.
Father Curran, one of your titles is a promoter of justice and peace, correct? For North America.
It's a bit of a dawning type title, yeah.
Well, if I look around, if I just open up a newspaper,
right, you're right.
You're not doing a great job.
I know. I don't know a lot of trouble.
I don't know what your job evaluation process is like, but it does sound like promoting justice and peace is a priority of the order. But I'm curious. I think that term would strike your average person as a little funny. What is a promoter of justice and peace, and why is that a priority of the order?
That is a wonderful question. Religious orders across the world, Jesuits, Vincentians, Dominicans, Franciscans, have intentionally named a person in their province or congregation to be one person reminding us or coalescing some of the spirit of the work that is about the call of justice and peace. That we remember the constant one of the most frequent words used in the gospel is justice or peace. The first thing Jesus said at the resurrection was peace be with you, right? That means let's make peace happen, right? Let's make that be a reality, right? And so promoters of justice and peace, it's very intimidating, the title, admittedly, but it's to be intentional about that. The reason we've structured that for years, since in a more robust way since Vatican II, was to do that, to be intentional about it, whether it's about the deforestation or it's about the CO2 levels in our environment. That's why Chicago, by the way, is a wonderful place to visit on its weather in recent years. That's a bad sign. I'm happy I live in Chicago, but that's not a good sign because we remember colder days in the 70s and 80s. Who is to lift that up, if not for a promoter of justice and peace, intentionality among members of the religious orders? So that's what we do. We're not meant to be like Superman, Superwoman in that sense as a promoter of justice and peace, just reminding us to the integrity of our mission.
There's someone just sort of like in charge of being like, hey, we have to keep our eye on this, right?
Keeping that eye on it, right? If you have an eye on it. So we're like, Dominicans are great at doing study. It's kind of thing a lot of people, professors, administrators of universities, high schools, those kind of things. One thing we're not as well known, and it's part of the intentionality, the whole core heritage and legacy of our justice and peace heritage of speaking word in the midst, even from our founder, St. Dominic, actually founded the order in the middle of a need for dialogue across religions. People don't know that part of it. They just think, oh, he's a nice guy, started preachers. No, they were sent 2 by 2 to go and impart dialogue with non-Catholics about seeing the humanity in common and reminding their sisters and brothers as Catholics, they are your community too. We need to respect other religious traditions of the peoples that we serve, certainly, for example, in our context in the U.S.
If I could go somewhere, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Justice and peace work in the church has always felt a little siloed to me, whether it's the religious orders maybe have a long legacy of it, and they have someone sort of keeping their eye on the ball. But even on a parish level, maybe it's like the St. Vincent de Paul group, but it doesn't feel like it like really permeates our lives as Christians. We're sort of content to have that like be a specific charism of different parts of the church. As someone who is in a religious order as a promoter of justice and peace, but also spends a lot of time in parishes, I'm wondering why you think that is, and if there's any, like, I'm imagining someone's listening to this saying, wow, I had no idea the church did all this stuff, that there was someone's job, that's your job. How does that person get more involved?
One of those legendary figures, Dom Helder Camara, once said that, we all know we have soup kitchens. Thank God we keep those open, make sure people are fed. But who's there asking people, why are people hungry? It's no good just to be putting clothes on people's backs. We found that out during COVID. The soul of people, the care of the integrity of the whole person, and the reason why people are in those plight situations has got to be dealt with systemically. And that's the work of justice and peace. It's not only one thing or the other, right? We have to have a soup kitchen. We have to have a way to get access to clothes on people's backs, especially after a tragedy like a hurricane. But we have to also remember, why do those tragedies happen, especially like human-made ones, like a war, things like an invasion, things like that, right? Why are people fleeing? So it's tragic to me. It's a very controversial thing. Everyone focused on, why are those Venezuelans coming? No one asked, what would ever make somebody have to flee their country and go over 1,000 miles from their home in order to find some place to consider a new home that was safer than what they left? And that means, no, you're driving your own car, renting your car up to, it's talking about literally depending on people and survival all the way. So the point of this is that we can't be just Catholics and talk about feeding people. We have to talk about how we teach people, to how the teaching of getting fed and the experience of being fed is a Christian thing. We are humans in all of that. You can't just do making sure people have access to food. You have to ask, why don't they have access to food? Because it's a human right. And as Catholics, it's our obligation to ask that question. Unfortunately, it can feel controversial to us because it asks tough questions that day to day you don't see the difference. So it's less motivating. We noticed that we've had a line at some of the parishes I've seen for years, much longer for the last number of years since COVID. No one's asking why. Why would people have to get in line for those? What is necessitating that? And it's called the price of living does not match their salary. They're working poor who need to go there, and we need to analyze those whys. So you're right. It's very hard for us as Catholics because it's a complicated process to examine and shift the structural reasons and sources for those problems. If we don't, we're just continuing on a cycle that will never end.
Well, Father Curran, I think you're doing a great job promoting justice and peace, no matter what Zach says. and I'm really, really grateful for your ministry. We do have one final question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, if you could canonize one person, living or dead, Catholic or not, fictional or real, who would it be and why?
Our Dominicans serve in Chiapas, Mexico. A bishop who died, Samuel Ruiz, is a saint. In the middle of a civil conflict, was a peace negotiator between the Zapatistas and the Mexican government, which I had the privilege to see firsthand. And the way that he decided to say, you have got to come together to come to a better solution about these problems of respect for indigenous people. Laudable, prophetic, courageous, and for that reason, and seeing how they've instituted that of so many different people and pastoral ministers in that diocese over the legacy of the years. By the way, the first bishop of Chiapas, Bartolome de las Casas, for all those people doing a little quiz. So that bishop served in that place. Absolutely the easy answer should be a saint.
All right, Bishop Samuel Ruiz Garcia.
You got it.
Got it? All
Yep.
right. Well, Father Curran, thank you so much for the work you do, the accompanying you do in a city that I love, Chicago, but also thank you for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
And now we have As One Friend Speaks to Another, the part of our show where we talk about where we're finding God in our lives this week and share stories of faith from across the Catholic Church. And this week we are joined by...
We're thrilled to be joined by our colleague, Ed Desciak, who is an O'Hare Fellow here at America. How's it going? A couple months into the job.
Oh, it's fantastic. America is a great place to work. I'm being paid to say that.
That's
but,
right.
It's been great. It's been fantastic.
You can collect your check on the way out.
Great.
So wanted to talk to you today about a reporting assignment that you just got back from a couple hours ago, correct?
Yes, correct.
So tell me about where you went and what you saw.
So I went today with the migrant ministry at St. Francis Xavier Parish, downtown here in Manhattan, to the Newark ICE detention facility at Delaney Hall. And we were there for this nationwide campaign, One Church, One Family, was organized by the Ignatian Solidarity Network. And they've been planning 2 days. One was today, October 22nd, and the next one will be on the feast of Mother Cabrini, the patron saint of immigrants, on November 13th. But they were planning these days of public witness. So they are taking a lot of different forms all across the country. The one that I went to today was at this detention center in this sort of industrial hellscape, bearing witness to the plight that the migrants there are experiencing, and consisted of a beautiful prayer service with comments from, we had religious priest, one of the auxiliary bishops from the Diocese of Newark was there as well, and we heard from local advocates and others sharing their experience during this difficult period and how they're getting through it.
I'm curious what stood out or surprised you from it. I don't know if you've been to an ICE detention center before. I have not, but I've seen these scenes of Catholics showing up and sometimes being rebuffed, meeting resistance. Did you see any of that, or was it mostly peaceful and going according to plan?
Yeah, thankfully it was mostly peaceful. There wasn't any sort of dramatic resistance that we were facing. We were hoping to get into the parking lot area, but unfortunately we had to stand in a somewhat precarious space on this highway that was basically right next door. But it was powerful. It was really jarring to see this in person. The detention center, Delaney Hall, it's this private facility, so it's privately owned, and was originally a prison. And when you go there in person, you see this dramatic scene of barbed wire. It's right next to a sewage processing plant, and it's in an area that the architecture is hostile, and it's not easy to get to. It took us a while to commute there to Newark and then get from Newark Penn Station to the facility. But it was incredible to see some of the people. There were some people from Pax Christi who were there who've been going daily to accompany people who are visiting family members at the detention facility.
So who might be detained there right now?
So the people who are being detained there right now are, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not an expert on this, but people who are either undocumented and are being processed by the Trump administration for deportation, who are waiting there. I should clarify, I don't have exact details on precisely who is there, but it is one of multiple detention facilities in New Jersey where migrants are being held awaiting processing or deportation.
I wonder what it felt like spiritually just to be present there. I think I've had this, I don't know, way of thinking about these actions in my own life where you can kind of despair and be like, what's the point? Like, we're not changing things. This is a huge problem. You know, there was we talked about in our episode today about this procession to bring Eucharist to people in a detention center in Chicago. And they even couldn't do that, much less change this whole mass deportation campaign. But then one thought that came to me was like, when I have a friend who's going through a personal tragedies, they've lost someone or they've broken up with someone, like just being with them is often enough. I know I can't fix the problem that they're going through. And so I imagine there must be something similar in this, larger relationship which we have with the body of Christ. And when one part of it is suffering, just being there is an important thing.
Absolutely. I think that was the theme of the event, was solidarity and accompaniment for, of course, the migrants who are experiencing this, who are in very difficult conditions in which they have been given very little or in some cases no food. They have these sort of arcane laws surrounding visitation where they have very strict dress codes. So you have families of migrants standing outside waiting to come in, and then they're not allowed to visit their family because their jeans have a rip in it or they're wearing open-toe shoes or something along these lines. So a lot of this, it was accompanying the migrants, but also I think the people doing this work that is, like you said, very difficult. And I wish I had an easy, we went to this prayer for witness and everything was solved. But I think that sort of prayer is important for spiritually sustaining the actual work. And we were lucky enough to hear from a lot of people who are doing that day in and day out.
I'm curious as to what this has done for your own spiritual life. One of the benefits of working in journalism is it sort of propels you to do things. You might have that inertia might otherwise stop you. Like even I think when I've reported on stories, like picking up the phone and calling someone, I think for a lot of people is a scary act nowadays. And unfortunately, you just got to keep doing that in journalism, and you got to keep showing up to events. I'm curious what you got out of today, spiritually or otherwise.
So I think that is a big thing for me is I have not gone to an event like this before, and working this job gave me this opportunity to go and see this firsthand. And obviously there's been a ton of coverage about these issues, but seeing it with my own eyes was it was powerful. And I think something that sort of covering now this issue and looking at how Catholics across the country are handling the current crisis around migration, there have been a lot of questions around what is the role of faith in sort of political life, especially on this issue. There's a history of separation of church and state, which I think can sometimes lead to some confusion on where is there room for faith in political life. And I think I saw a really powerful integration of those in a very healthy way, in a very sincere way, at this public witness that is, there's Catholics on both sides of the aisle, and it's a touchstone for people that I think is powerful to experience and hopefully can propel others to see the humanity in these people.
And I think there's something moving, and this is just, I guess, about journalism in general, but there's a very, even the idea of being a witness is a very Christian one or a religious one inherently, right? Like to see something and report on it. And I think, to be able to do that or experience that, even if it's your first time, I think it reminds me of why, we do this work. So I want to thank you for doing the work and also coming on our show to talk about it.
Oh, well, thank you both for having me.
And for our listeners, the next day of action is...
It's November 13th. Yep, the feast day of Saint Mother Cabrini.
Awesome. And we'll link to that campaign that Ignatian Solidarity Network's putting on in our show notes.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ed.
Thank you, guys.
Jesuitical is made by us, Sebastian Gomes, Will Gualtieri, and Kevin Christopher Robles. Faith formation provided by Father Eric Sundrup, S.J. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, or like the show on your favorite platforms. You can support Jesuitical by subscribing to American Magazine at americanmagazine.org. I'm Ashley McKinless with Zach Davis. We'll see you next week.